The words hit me like a physical blow, a cold, sharp slap to the face, even though no hand had touched me. That hateful old woman. I heard my daughter's voice, a thin, sharp wire of resentment. Was it truly her speaking those words? Or had I somehow stumbled into a cruel dream, a twisted echo of a life that wasn't mine? Then my son-in-law, Mark, chimed in, his voice a low rumble of agreement. She's nothing but a burden, a drain on our resources, always underfoot. A burden. The woman who had built this very house, who had raised her alone, who had sacrificed everything for her. How could they speak of me like this? In my own home. The home I had believed was ours. What did it mean for everything I thought I knew about my own family, my own sanctuary, my very worth in this world? I stood frozen in the hallway, the sound of their voices bleeding through the thin wall of the living room, seeping into my very bones. My laundry basket, heavy with their clothes, slipped from my grasp, scattering a rainbow of socks and shirts across the polished floorboards I had just waxed that morning. My heart, a frail bird, fluttered erratically in my chest, a desperate, trapped thing. They were talking about me, plain as day. Not a whisper, but a casual, cruel conversation, as if I were a distant, irrelevant problem, not a living, breathing presence in the next room. My daughter, Sarah, continued, her tone dripping with exasperation. Honestly, Mom, she just expects us to cater to her every whim. She acts like we owe her something, like we asked her to stay here. Asked her to stay here. The phrase echoed, hollow and mocking. I had been here, for years, since Sarah and Mark had married, since she'd come to me, teary-eyed and overwhelmed by the prospect of a mortgage and 2 young children. I had offered. Of course, because that's what mothers do, isn't it? They step in, they support, they make sacrifices. I had seen it as an extension of my love, a natural progression of family, a way to be close to my grandchildren, little Leo and Maya, who were the true joys of my twilight years. But now, it was clear, they saw it differently. They saw me as a millstone, a shadow that darkened their perfect, modern life. The pain was a physical ache, a dull throb behind my eyes, a tightening in my throat that made it hard to breathe. I knelt slowly, gathering the fallen clothes, my hands trembling. Each item felt heavy, imbued with their disdain. This wasn't just a moment of overheard cruelty, I realized. It was the culmination of years of quiet neglect, of unsaid slights, of a growing chasm between us that I had desperately tried to ignore. I had been a single mother, you see, a widow before Sarah was even 5. The world had been a brutal place back then for a woman alone. But I had worked tirelessly. 2 jobs sometimes, to keep a roof over our heads, to put food on the table, to ensure Sarah had opportunities I never did. I remembered late nights at the sewing machine, the whirring sound, a lullaby as Sarah slept. I remembered the worn-out shoes, the skipped meals so she could have new books. When she met Mark, a bright, ambitious young man, I had been overjoyed. I dipped into my meager savings, the little nest egg I'd built for my old age, to help with their down payment on this very house, this spacious, 4-bedroom home that had become my gilded cage. I cooked, I cleaned, I did the laundry, I picked up Leo and Maya from school, I helped with their homework, I baked their favorite cookies. I was the silent engine that kept their household running smoothly, the invisible hand that made their busy lives possible. But the thanks had become rarer, the smiles dimmer, the conversations shorter. Now, they barely looked at me, their eyes sliding past me as if I were a piece of furniture, a fixture in the background, easily overlooked, easily dismissed. The next few weeks were a cruel pantomime. I continued my routines, the familiar rhythm of domesticity. But now, each task was laced with a bitter understanding. As I chopped vegetables for dinner, I imagined their words. Hateful old woman, echoing with each slice. As I folded their crisp, clean shirts, I saw the invisible weight of their resentment. I tried to act normal, to smile, to engage, but the words were a constant hum beneath the surface, a discordant tune that drowned out any semblance of peace. Sarah would ask, "Mom, can you watch the kids tonight? Mark and I have a dinner out." And I would hear, "Can you continue to be our free labor, our invisible nanny, our convenient burden?" Mark would leave his muddy shoes by the door, and I would think, "He knows I'll clean them, because I'm just here to serve." It felt like a slow, agonizing unraveling of everything I believed in. My silent sacrifices, once acts of love, now felt like foolish endeavors, a testament to my naivety. Then came the suggestion. It wasn't a direct order. Of course, they were far too clever for that. It was subtle, insidious, woven into casual conversation. "Mom," Sarah began one evening at dinner, her voice saccharine, sweet. "You know, we've been thinking, it must be hard for you, living with all our chaos. Don't you ever wish you had your own space, your own independence?" My spoon clattered against my plate. "Independence," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Mark nodded, his expression carefully solicitous. "Yes, Mary, it's just, you've always been such a strong, capable woman. We feel like we're holding you back, in a way, keeping you from living your own life." Leo and Maya, sensing the shift in atmosphere, looked up from their plates, their innocent eyes wide. I wanted to scream, to shatter the delicate facade they had so painstakingly constructed. My own life, my own independence. Was this their polite way of telling me to leave, to find somewhere else to be a burden? My mind raced, picturing a cramped, lonely apartment, a life stripped bare of the familiar sounds of children, of the only family I had left. The thought was a chilling draft that snaked through my soul. I managed a weak smile. "I'm happy here, dear. I'm happy being with you all." Sarah's smile tightened, a flicker of impatience in her eyes. "Of course you are, Mom. But don't you think it's time to think about you?" The insidious pressure mounted over the next few weeks. Brochures for senior living communities, articles about the joys of independent living, all subtly left on the coffee table for me to discover. Each one was a fresh stab, a painful reminder that my presence was unwanted. One sleepless night, staring at the ceiling, the old, familiar ache in my chest intensified. This house. It was my house, wasn't it? Or had it ever truly been? I remembered the excitement, the signing of papers, the grand plans. I remembered the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a kind old man who had handled all my affairs since my husband passed. There had been talk of a transfer of ownership to Sarah and Mark as part of my financial support. A gift, an act of selfless love. But had it actually gone through? A tiny, defiant spark ignited within me, a glimmer of suspicion amidst the desolation. My memory, though sometimes foggy with age, held on to certain details with surprising tenacity. I remembered a lot of paperwork, but did I remember the final, official confirmation? I had trusted them implicitly, of course. I had signed whatever they put in front of me, assuming it was all for the best. The next day, with a newfound resolve that surprised even myself, I began my quiet investigation. My old documents were stored in a dusty box in the attic, tucked away, behind forgotten holiday decorations and childhood toys. The attic was usually a place of nostalgic comfort, but today it felt like an archaeological dig, each layer of dust a testament to forgotten truths. I carefully pulled out the box, my hands trembling slightly. Inside, nestled amongst old tax returns and insurance policies, were the original deeds, the purchase agreements, the loan documents. I sorted through them with a meticulousness born of desperation. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, the dates, the signatures. And then I saw it. Or rather, what I didn't see. The transfer of ownership document was there, but it wasn't fully executed. There was a signature missing, a stamp unapplied, a final step clearly incomplete. The house. This house, where I was being told I was a burden, was still legally, unequivocally, mine. My name, Mary Jensen, was printed clearly as the sole owner. A strange mix of shock, vindication, and a profound sadness washed over me. Shock at their apparent oversight or deliberate deception. Vindication that my gut feeling had been right. And sadness at the depth of their betrayal. How could they have forgotten, or pretended to forget? Or, perhaps, more chillingly, they had simply assumed I would never check, that I was too old, too trusting, too easily dismissed. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. This wasn't just about a house. This was about power, about control, about my very dignity. I sat there in the attic, surrounded by the ghosts of Christmases past, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of righteous anger, a warmth spreading through my cold, neglected heart. This was my leverage, my shield, my path to reclaiming myself. My first call was to a new lawyer, not Mr. Henderson, who had since retired, but a brisk, efficient woman named Ms. Pack Davies, recommended by a friend from my old prayer group. I wanted a fresh pair of eyes, someone unconnected to my past assumptions. I met her in her sleek downtown office, the city humming below us, a world away from the quiet suburban street where my gilded cage stood. I laid out the documents, explaining the situation in a voice that surprised me with its steadiness. Ms. Davies listened intently, her expression unreadable behind her smart glasses. When I finished, she looked at me, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Mrs. Jensen," she said, her voice calm and professional. "It appears you are indeed the sole legal owner of the property. The transfer was never legally finalized. For whatever reason, they seem to have overlooked or simply ignored this crucial step. You have every right to do with your property as you wish." The words were like a balm, a cool compress on a festering wound. I felt a surge of strength, a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Next, I contacted a real estate agent, a cheerful young woman named Emily, whose enthusiasm was contagious. We discussed the market, the value of the house, the best time to sell. The whole process felt surreal, like I was orchestrating a secret play within my own life, a silent rebellion unfolding right under their oblivious noses. I had to be careful, of course. Sarah and Mark were often home, and I couldn't risk them finding out. Emily understood, and we arranged showings during school hours, when the house was empty. I would meticulously tidy up, erase all traces of family life, and then, like a phantom, I would slip away, leaving Emily to weave her magic. Each showing was an adrenaline rush, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I imagined Sarah or Mark returning early, catching me in the act, demanding explanations. But they never did. They were too absorbed in their own lives, too busy to notice the subtle changes, the fleeting scent of a new air freshener, the slight rearrangement of a decorative pillow. They were too busy, I realized, dismissing me, to notice what I was truly capable of. While the legal and real estate wheels slowly turned, I decided to conduct my own experiment in independence, as I privately called it. If they thought I was a burden, if they truly believed I contributed nothing, then I would show them what life without their hateful old woman truly looked like. I started small. One morning, I didn't wake up early to make breakfast. I usually had a spread laid out: eggs, toast, coffee brewing, the aroma, a gentle wake-up call. That day, I stayed in my room, reading my book, enjoying the quiet. Soon, I heard the frantic sounds of the kitchen, pots clanging, confused murmurs, the distinct smell of burnt toast. Leo and Maya grumbled about being hungry, and Sarah's voice, sharp with annoyance, cut through the air. "Mom, aren't you going to make breakfast?" I walked out, feigning surprise. "Oh, darling, I thought you wanted to try being more independent." I decided to try it too. Her face flushed, but she said nothing. Over the next few days, my experiment escalated. The laundry pile, once a mountain I conquered daily, began to grow, threatening to engulf the utility room. Clothes lay unfolded, unwashed, for days. "Mom, my uniform isn't clean," Leo complained one evening. "Neither are my jeans," Maya added, her lower lip trembling. I smiled sweetly. "Oh, sweethearts, your mother and father are so busy. I thought it was time you learned to manage your own things. You can help them, you know. It's part of being a family." Sarah shot me a glare, but she couldn't argue. After all, wasn't this about independence? Dinners became a chaotic affair of takeout and frozen meals. I stopped cooking. The elaborate, home-cooked meals I had prepared for years, the roasts, the pasta dishes, the fresh salads, vanished. Instead, I would quietly prepare a small, simple meal for myself in my room. A bowl of soup, a sandwich. The kitchen, once the heart of our home, became a wasteland of discarded containers and unwashed dishes. "Mom, don't you think you should start cooking again?" Mark finally ventured one evening, picking at a lukewarm pizza slice. His usual calm facade was crumbling, replaced by a subtle desperation. "Oh, Mark," I replied, deliberately, feigning innocence. "I just thought, with all this talk of independence, you and Sarah would want to take charge of the meals. You know, explore your own culinary talents." Sarah, usually quick with a retort, was silent, her eyes darting between me and the overflowing sink. The house, once meticulously clean and ordered, slowly descended into a state of disarray. Dust bunnies danced in the corners. Surfaces were sticky. Bathrooms gleamed less brightly. My daily cleaning rituals had ceased. I watched their frustration mount, their stress levels visibly rising. The constant bickering between Sarah and Mark grew louder, more frequent, fueled by their inability to cope with the domestic burden I had so silently carried for so long. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, and completely lost without my invisible labor. I felt a pang of guilt, watching my grandchildren caught in the crossfire of their parents' frayed tempers. But then I remembered the hateful old woman, the burden, and my resolve hardened. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about showing them the truth, the value of the woman they had so carelessly dismissed. The day the sale finalized was a blur of signatures, bank transfers, and a quiet, profound sense of finality. I now had a substantial sum in my own account, enough to secure my future, enough to start fresh. I had also found a charming, smaller apartment, bathed in natural light, with a tiny balcony, perfect for my potted herbs. It was modest, but it felt like a palace, a sanctuary waiting to embrace me. The closing date for the sale of their house, my house, was set for 3 weeks from then. It was time for the curtain to rise on the final act of my quiet rebellion. I waited until a stove, Sunday evening, a rare occasion when the entire family was gathered around the dining table, picking at a lackluster store-bought roast chicken. The tension in the room was palpable. A thick, suffocating blanket woven from unwashed clothes, uneaten food, and unspoken resentments. I cleared my throat, the sound unusually loud in the strained silence. Sarah and Mark looked up, their faces tired and drawn. Leo and Maya, sensing something significant, stopped their quiet squabble. "I have something important to tell you all," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands that lay hidden beneath the table. Sarah, ever impatient, sighed. What is it, Mom? More talk about independence. I met her gaze directly. Yes, Sarah, in a way. I've taken your advice. I've decided to embrace my independence. I took a deep breath, and then the words, carefully rehearsed, flowed out. I've sold the house. The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. It stretched, taut and brittle, until I thought it might snap. Sarah's fork clattered to her plate. Mark's jaw went slack. Their eyes, wide with disbelief, fixed on me. What are you talking about, Mom? Sarah finally managed, her voice a strangled whisper. Sold what house? This is our house. No, darling, I replied softly, reaching into the large envelope I had placed beside my plate. It was always my house. I purchased it. The transfer of ownership, for reasons unknown to me, was never legally completed. My name remained on the deed. I laid the legal documents on the table, the original deed, the incomplete transfer form, and the recent sales agreement, all stamped and signed, undeniable proof. Mark snatched up the papers, his eyes frantically scanning the pages, his face drained of color, turning a sickly white. This is impossible, he stammered, his voice hoarse with shock. We've been paying the mortgage, the taxes, for years. Yes, I confirmed. You have. And for that, I am grateful. However, for years, you have also enjoyed the benefit of living here rent-free, with a live-in housekeeper, cook, and nanny, all without compensation. I have kept meticulous records of my financial contributions over the years, the down payment, the utilities I covered, the groceries I bought, the children's expenses, and I also have a detailed account of the market value of the services I have provided. Had you paid for them? I placed another stack of papers on the table, neat spreadsheets detailing years of my hidden contributions, both financial and labor, far outweighing what they had put in, and the legal assessment of the market value of my caregiving and domestic work. The house officially closes in 15 days. You have 2 weeks to find new accommodations and move out. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of shock and fury, not sorrow. You can't do this, Mom, she cried, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. You can't just throw us out. Where are we supposed to go? What about the children? I am not throwing you out, Sarah, I said, my voice unwavering, though my heart was pounding. I am simply reclaiming what is rightfully mine. Just as you were so eager for me to find my independence, I am now finding mine. As for the children, I have ensured they will always have a place in my life, if they wish it, a place separate from this house and these circumstances. I looked at Leo and Maya, who were staring at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. My heart ached for them, but I knew this was a necessary pain, a sharp cut to heal a deeper wound. Mark finally spoke, his voice low, filled with a raw, desperate anger. This is revenge, isn't it, Mary? You're getting back at us. I met his gaze, my eyes clear. No, Mark. This is not revenge. This is about dignity. This is about boundaries. For years, I gave everything I had, quietly, lovingly, believing I was contributing to our family, to your happiness. I raised Sarah alone, supported you both financially, cared for my grandchildren, cooked your meals, cleaned your home. And in return, I was dismissed, disrespected, and branded a hateful old woman, a burden. You suggested I find my own independence. Well, I have found it, in a way you clearly didn't anticipate. Forgiveness, perhaps, can come in time, when true remorse is shown. But respect, true respect, must be earned through long-term action, not just empty words. This is my act of self-preservation, My way of showing you and myself that I am worth more than the services I provide, more than the role of an invisible, unappreciated fixture in your lives. The next 2 weeks were a maelstrom of anger, accusations, and frantic activity. Sarah and Mark were furious, devastated, and completely unprepared. They raged. They pleaded. They tried to undermine my claims. But the legal documents were irrefutable. Emily, my real estate agent, fielded their lawyers' calls with a calm professionalism that I deeply admired. I remained a quiet, steady presence, packing my own modest belongings, preparing for my departure. I avoided their arguments, their desperate pleas, their thinly veiled threats. I spoke only when necessary, my voice firm but devoid of malice. I made it clear that my decision was final, unchangeable. I saw the shame, the fear, and perhaps a flicker of understanding begin to dawn in their eyes as they faced the stark reality of their new situation. The house they had taken for granted, the services they had exploited, were now gone. On the day of the closing, a moving truck waited outside. I had arranged for a small group of movers to take my boxes to my new apartment. I gave one final look around the house, a place filled with so many memories, both sweet and bitter. I remembered Sarah's first steps in the living room, the children's laughter echoing through the halls, the quiet comfort of my reading nook. I said my goodbyes to Leo and Maya, holding them close, promising to see them very soon, assuring them my love for them was unconditional, irrespective of their parents' choices. Their tear-streaked faces tore at my heart, but I knew this was for their good too, a harsh lesson in responsibility and respect that their parents desperately needed to learn. As I stepped out the front door, the key in my hand, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The house was no longer a symbol of my sacrifice or my pain, but a stepping stone to a new beginning. My new apartment, though small, was a haven of peace. It was filled with light, uncluttered, a blank canvas upon which I could paint the rest of my life. I arranged my few cherished possessions, a comfortable armchair by the window, a small collection of books, my old sewing machine, the silence, initially unnerving after years of constant family noise, slowly transformed into a soothing balm. I bought a few pots of vibrant flowers for my balcony, the simple act of nurturing life. A small, quiet rebellion against the barrenness I had recently endured. I began to build a new life, brick by brick, with deliberate intention. I joined a local prayer group, finding solace and camaraderie among women who shared similar spiritual journeys. Their gentle wisdom and comforting presence filled a void I hadn't even realized existed. I enrolled in an art class, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. My hands, once busy with endless chores, now learned to wield a paintbrush, creating vivid landscapes and abstract forms that surprised me with their beauty. The colors on the canvas felt like an outpouring of my rediscovered joy. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding profound connection in the unconditional love of abandoned creatures. Their soft fur and grateful purrs were a gentle comfort, reminding me of the simple, pure goodness that still existed in the world. I spent hours in my tiny garden, planting herbs and nurturing small tomato plants. The act of watching life grow from a tiny seed, a profound metaphor for my own journey. My spirit, once crushed and depleted, began to mend, slowly but surely. The self-respect I had fought so hard to reclaim settled within me, a quiet, unwavering strength. I found myself humming old tunes as I went about my day, smiling at strangers, feeling a connection to the world around me that had been lost for too long. My days were mine, to fill as I pleased, with activities that brought me joy, purpose, and genuine connection. I met new people, engaged in stimulating conversations, and discovered facets of myself I hadn't known were there. The woman who had been a hateful old woman was blossoming into something vibrant and new. Meanwhile, The old family struggled. I heard snippets from mutual acquaintances, carefully filtering out gossip from genuine concern. They had to downsize, moving into a much smaller rental, struggling to manage the domestic responsibilities I had once shouldered so effortlessly. The kids, Leo and Maya, bore the brunt of their parents' stress, their young lives disrupted and uncertain. Sarah and Mark tried to contact me, at first with angry, demanding messages, then with more desperate, pleading tones. They expressed remorse, begged for help, hinted at reconciliation. I kept my distance, responding only with polite, brief messages, reaffirming my love for them but holding firm to my boundaries. Forgiveness was a journey, I knew, but it required genuine understanding and sustained effort on their part, not just a desperate attempt to return to a convenient arrangement. My connection with Leo and Maya, however, was different. I made sure to see them regularly, taking them to the park, to museums, for ice cream. I listened to their stories, offered comfort and guidance, and simply was there for them, without expectation or judgment. I saw their genuine affection, their unburdened love, and I treasured it. It was a love that didn't demand sacrifice, only presence. It was the kind of love I had always longed for, pure and uncomplicated. 6 months passed, and as I sat on my sun-drenched balcony, sipping tea and watching my tomato plants ripen, a profound realization washed over me. This small apartment, this peaceful haven, was my true home. Not the grand house I had once owned, not the place where my family resided, but this quiet sanctuary where I was truly myself, free from the expectations and burdens of others. Home, I understood, wasn't a structure or a specific set of people. Home was a feeling, a state of being, a place within my own heart where I felt safe, valued, and authentic. The lesson was clear, sharp, and undeniably true. Loving myself, establishing firm boundaries, and prioritizing my own well-being wasn't selfish. It was, in fact, the most profound act of love I could offer, not just to myself, but to everyone around me. For only when I was whole, when I was respected, could I truly offer genuine, unconditional love, a love that didn't demand, but simply existed, pure and untainted. And that, I realized, was the most beautiful redemption of all.